Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Questions on British Muslim TV with me, Mohammed Shafiq. It's great to be back after the short Eid break. I hope you and your families have had a great Eid. Now, we're broadcasting Sky Channel 752 and across social media at the handle British Muslim TV. Wherever you are joining us around the world, a very warm welcome. We want you to comment on the stories we're featuring tonight. You can call us on 01924 231083, or you can message us on the WhatsApp number which is on your screen now. If you're watching on Facebook, you can post your comment and I will share some other comments on air shortly. Now, let's give you some news updates from the previous week. The number of positive COVID cases has fallen again for the 7th day in a row. Public Health England has said in response that this showed the pandemic was not over yet, and has urged people to continue to take precautions. Dr. Yvonne Doyle heads the Public Health England, and she said that people should get both vaccine doses, continue to meet outside, isolate if told to by NHS Test and Trace, and limit contacts. Now, this pandemic is far from over, she said. She further went on to say that the number of deaths was in part due to the high number of cases recorded in recent weeks, with the latest figures highlighting we are still in the midst of a third wave. Now, positive cases have gone from around 50,000 7 days ago to around 23,000 yesterday. Today, I know they've gone up slightly on that figure yesterday. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has said in response, I quote, "It's very, very important that we don't allow ourselves to run away with premature conclusions about this. Step 4 of our opening up only took place a few days ago. People have got to remain very cautious, and that remains the approach of Her Majesty's government." Now, in other news, elections have been completed in Azad, Jammu Kashmir, in which the PTI, the party of Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, had a landslide victory of 25 seats out of the 25 seats out of the 45 seats in the Assembly. The Pakistan People's Party came second with 11 seats, and the sitting government of Pakistan Muslim League Noon government of Raja Farooq Haider got 6 seats, which is a humiliation for a governing party who've been in power for the last 4 to 5 years. Now, the Jammu Kashmir People's Party and the Muslim Conference got 1 seat each. Now, PTI are on course to elect a new Prime Minister and a new cabinet in Azad, Jammu Kashmir. We'll keep an eye on that as that story develops. Now, shortly we head to Washington, D.C. to talk to one of American Muslims' most important voices on the Middle East. Hamdi Rifai joins us to discuss Middle Eastern politics and the aftermath of the recent violence in Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territories. Hamdi joins us live shortly from the United States. And then we head to Wakefield, just up the road here, to talk to the Wakefield Drivers Association President, Yasar Ahmed, about allegations that taxi drivers here in the city are being treated as third-class citizens. And we finish off in Scotland, in Glasgow in particular, to talk to Shahid Hanif, the Chief Operating Officer of Colour Heritage Radio. No, it's not, sorry, it's Colour Heritage. Colourful Heritage, let me get right, sorry. Colourful Heritage, which highlights Muslim and South Asian heritage Scotland. It's a must conversation, so please do continue to watch us. As I said, we want to hear from you tonight. You can call us on 01924 231083 or messages on British Muslim TV across social media. Alternatively, you can send us a WhatsApp message. As I keep saying, the number is on your screen now. The questions we're considering tonight: is the Middle East changing? Are taxi drivers being treated as cash cows by local authorities and councils, but treated as third-class citizens? And how can we ensure Muslim and South Asian heritage acknowledged and celebrated across the UK? Please share your thoughts on 01924 231083 or post us on social media, and we'll read some of the comments as we get through the show. Now, let's start with our first guest. During the recent violence in Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territories, over 200 people were killed, including 65 children. Following Donald Trump's deal of the century, 4 Muslim countries, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco and Sudan, established diplomatic relations and then relatively kept quiet as Israel attacked Gaza. Now, the Israeli government has claimed that they were responding to rockets from Hamas and defending its citizens. people have said this was a unique moment for the Middle East with Joe Biden as the new president of the United States and a new foreign policy. He argued that was going to be based on human rights and that change was coming to the Middle East. Now, some claim it was all a charade. Biden was not really serious. Hamdi Rifai is one of America's most important voices about the Middle East. He's a distinguished law career, which has seen him become the voice of those suffering in the Middle East and across the United States. He served as deputy chair of the New Jersey Republican State Party and since 2011 has directed the work of Arab Americans for Democracy in Syria. I'm pleased to say Hamdi Rifai is joining us live from Washington, D.C. in the United States. Hamdi, assalamu alaikum. Very well welcome to the program. It's a great honor to have you on, sir.
It's my honor to be here. Thank you, and welcome to all your viewers.
Firstly, Joe Biden just recently celebrated 6 months in office. How do you assess his time in the White House during those 6 months?
As it goes for domestic issues, he's done perfectly fine. He's done a great job of distributing coronavirus vaccines. But on the world stage, he has carried the banner of saying America is back, but America has been anything but back. America has been absent. It's really a continuation of the America alone and isolated policy that started many years ago with Obama, continued into Trump, and now continues into Biden. During Obama's tenure in office as president, he always wanted to shift to the South Pacific. He never wanted to be involved in the Middle East. And we saw that continue now with President Biden. So while our motto today might be America is back, America is anything but back, America has been absent.
Yeah, and we know there are inquiries going on as we speak in Capitol Hill about the insurrection that happened in January. And Donald Trump seems to be appealing to start again campaigning for the midterm elections in 2022, but also the presidential election in 2024. How do you assess American politics where we are at this moment in time?
I think it's all very reactionary. I don't think Trump holds the sway that people believe he holds. I think we're going to see very quickly that his bully pulpit is over. The fact of the matter is that we see indiscretions, we see treason from the Trump party. I'm not going to call it the GOP anymore. Throughout America. Of course, there are those who appear loyal to Trump, but that's because they are eyeing re-election themselves. Trump, whether he can get re-elected or not, I'm very doubtful. A lot of Americans died under Trump. A lot of Americans have seen the light since he's not been in office, and I don't think there's a real future to Trumpism. There is a future to American nationalism, and that's a problem because American nationalism is really kickback or a refusal to accept the future as it is and the future that's coming. So, there are those who insist on embracing Trump and Trumpism because they see it as the best chance for the Republican Party. I myself left the Republican Party years ago just for this reason, that they were headed on a slide towards bigotry, towards separation, towards nationalism, to a very unseemly kind of patriotism that I certainly would not be able to accept.
You were the former chair, as we were saying at the top of the program, of the state Republican Party in New Jersey. So former Governor Chris Christie and others. How did you end up in the Republican Party?
Well, I had been a Republican for many years, going back as far back as 1994. Well, the Republican Party as a principle or an idea is a great party, but that's not the same party that exists today. The party that I belonged to believed in conservative values, believed in equality, believed in upholding the Constitution. Now, they say that they still believe in the Constitution and these things, but really it's become very obvious that they only use the American Constitution to serve their political goals. The Constitution itself means very little to the GOP today or to the Trump party. The values of conservatism don't exist in the GOP today. Today, the GOP is more about isolation and about withdrawing from the world and against other things. So it doesn't really stand for anything anymore. It stands for being against things rather than for things. And of course, being against things means it stands against immigrants, it stands against Muslims, it stands against inclusion, it stands against equality, it stands against all of those things that made up its very essence going back to 1994. I was a member of the Republican Party because it served Muslim interests very well in those days. It served Muslim interests because in those days we were talking about interfaith relations. We were talking about faith initiatives. We were talking about the ability to fund Muslim charter schools. We were talking about openness and Muslims running for office. That's changed quite a bit. But the reality is that for all of the negatives of the Trump party, those negatives also exist in the Democratic Party. Today, the Democratic Party...
Yeah, but I'm just trying to figure out those changes, those Muslim Americans who've been elected generally tend to have been from the Democratic Party. Your party, your former party, is quite behind.
They have been. Today we see that there are Muslims elected to the Congress, but look at their positions. Who are they representing? For example, we can see that oftentimes the Muslim representatives, the Muslim Congress people that are serving the American public certainly aren't serving all of Muslims' interests. We saw them vote against the appropriations bill that would have created the Caesar Sanctions Act that would have helped Syrians. Well, I mean, 1 million Syrians, Muslims, have been killed under Assad. Wasn't that important to those Democrats that are serving America and that also were mindful of Muslims? Well, I mean, which came first for those representatives? The Democratic Party, their political goals, or Syrian Muslims? They voted against the Appropriations Act that would have helped Muslims. So, you know, this is a knife that goes both ways. It's never an easy political decision in America.
Okay. I want you to stay there, Hamdi. I know you're going to stay with us. We're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the important conversation. But more importantly, let's talk about the Middle East. We'll talk about Syria and the Palestinian occupied territories. Join us on the other side of these very important messages. Don't go anywhere. I'm waiting. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. Now we're talking to Hamdi Rifai from the United States. He's in Washington, D.C. Hamdi, let's start with Syria, because this is something which has been your life for these past 10, 11 years. Recently, we've seen President Assad being inaugurated for his new term of office. We've had 10 years of war, hundreds of thousands, if not 1 million people killed or displaced. And Bashar al-Assad seems to want to stay in office. How do you reflect on the last 10 years and 10 years since the uprising, but more importantly, the international community's inability to stand up to that aggression?
Well, the current situation today is that Assad has really lost. He controls just a little over half of the country. That's all. He doesn't control the borders of Syria. The economy has collapsed, and Syria has become nothing more than a narco state reliant on the sale of Captagon worldwide. Syria has become the world's largest drug dealer. The past 10 years have been difficult on Syrians. We've seen friends of Syria who turned out to be enemies of Syria. We've seen people who've made promises turn out to be lying. We've seen our friends turn out to be less than friendly. It's been a heartbreaking situation, but the fact is that Syrians against Assad exist in now, we'll say, 2 opposition groups. We have the Syrians in Idlib, who control part of the country and are supported by Turkey. And then we see in the northeast, areas east of the Euphrates, where the SDF, supported by the United States, controls some of the territory there. Now, the SDF, obviously we know, is not really the SDF. It's really controlled by the YPG, which is the Syrian offshoot of the PKK, a designated terror group. Syrians in northeast Syria are essentially being held hostage by Kurdish terrorists, but at least they're not under Assad. So there's certainly a lot to be said for where we are, and we've done it with almost no help. And we've done it by making our own weapons, getting light weapons, and making as much as we could with what we've had.
Yeah, because you think originally the plan was to have military action to depose of Bashar al-Assad, but obviously Iran and Russia are supporting President Assad and have done for the last 10 years. Is that primarily one of the reasons why the international community didn't take action? Because, you know, Syria's become a political football by international actors?
I'm going to have to disagree with you just slightly. Syrians have never really called en masse for military intervention. We have simply called for the past 10 years to stop withholding military arms from us. We're more than happy to fight for ourselves. We don't need the United States to come and fight for us. We don't need anyone from France, the UK, or otherwise to come fight for us. In fact, we'd like all of the foreign nationals out. We were almost on the cusp of winning in 2014. Damascus was going to fall. If you recall, Yarmouk was under siege. Everybody there was either killed or shuffled out. So, you know, the reality is that what we've called for is for an opportunity to be free, an opportunity to do what we need to do. Now, because we're Muslim, I think, our detractors were successful in painting us as extremists when that's anything but the case. And that prevented us from receiving the proper support from the US, France, the UK, Germany, etc. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that, you know, Assad hasn't won. We almost won, and we're still fighting.
Now, the United States government in the last 24 hours have put, this is the US Treasury Department, have imposed sanctions on those 8 Syrian prisons run by Bashar al-Assad intelligence community and 5 senior officers. Do you think those sort of sanctions make a difference?
Well, the economy of Syria has collapsed, so I don't think it's merely a result of the war. The fact is that these sanctions, the Caesar sanctions in particular, have been very targeted towards preventing military aid to Assad and to keeping money out of Assad's hands. Assad and his supporters like to say that the sanctions are hurting ordinary Syrians, but that there's simply no evidence of that. Just literally no evidence of that. If anything, what is hurting ordinary Syrians are not the sanctions, but Assad's use of the sanctions rhetorically and manipulating the sanctions to keep for himself anything possible and to prevent Syrian citizens from receiving anything. He knows that if he keeps Syrians hungry and searching for their next meal, they can't oppose him. He keeps the populations in Damascus and other areas that he controls docile by keeping them thinking it's the sanctions hurting them and that they have to search for the next meal. The Caesar sanctions have really been, you know, a great thing for Syrians because it allows us to keep Assad weak.
Yeah, keeps him weak and then, but still keeps him in power. And you were telling us about the Syrian crisis 10 years on. I wanted to move on now and talk about Gaza and the Palestinian struggle. In the recent military campaign by Israel, over 200 Palestinians, including 65 children, were killed. What did you make of that violence and response or lack of it from the international community?
Well, I just want to say, may God protect their souls. Every last human that was lost was a disaster. The theft of Palestinian properties in Sheikh Jarrah and other areas is not a new thing. We've seen the tension between Palestinians and Israel heat up almost every year throughout my lifetime. Israel continues a campaign of taking property in an expansionist way. The settlements are a big problem, And the West Bank really, what does the Palestinian Authority still rule over in the West Bank? Swiss cheese of hamlets of the Palestinian Authority. Israel has settled most of it, or maybe not most of it, but much of it. And the fact of the matter is that, the tension with regard to Sheikh Jarrah, and I don't know if you saw today's news, they announced that even if the courts rule against the Palestinian families in Sheikh Jarrah, the company trying to take those properties, even if that company wins, they will not evict those families from those homes. So Israel has even recognized that their conduct is too extreme to maintain the peace. But, this is not a new thing. Israel does bad, and that Palestinians are left with no alternative but to respond in a very hostile way.
Yeah, but do you then think that Hamas and the other militant groups in Gaza have to take some responsibility for the rocket attacks into Israeli territory in which innocent people, including an Israeli child, was killed? That also should be condemned. Would you condemn it?
Absolutely. Hamas, well, first of all, let's start with this, some basic facts. Sheikh Jarrah is not in Gaza. What Hamas was doing, sending out rockets in response to the Sheikh Jarrah evictions, is beyond my ability to understand. It makes no sense other than Hamas is taking advantage of Palestinian suffering for its own political gain. It's just that simple. Hamas, I don't want to say it's a terrorist organization, but I mean, it was elected to rule in Gaza, but it does not rule as a government. It rules as, I'll say, a criminal family. It doesn't rule correctly, and it had nothing to do with Sheikh Jarrah. They're not even a legal authority in that area. I mean, the conduct of Hamas should be condemned.
Yeah, and we've got about 3 minutes left, and I just wanted you reflect on your years of service and campaigning for the Middle East. Can we see ourselves to have a new Middle East where freedom can reign and where human rights can be for everyone?
Well, we see a lot of positives and we see a lot of negatives. Today, if we look at Syria, Syria's a mess, but the revolution continues. If we look at Lebanon, it's on the verge of absolute bankruptcy and becoming a failed state. I don't see many hopeful signs in Lebanon. Najib Mikati who is in bed with Assad and Hezbollah, is going to put together another Hezbollah government. Hezbollah is as bad as anyone. If we look at Tunisia, there was a coup by the supposedly constitutional lawyer president of Tunisia that had respect for the rule of law, and now he has eliminated the prime minister and the parliament without constitutional authority. If we look at Iraq, Iraq's government has become a model of another Lebanon, just a sectarian government, I won't say controlled by Iran, but controlled by sectarianism with excessive Iranian influence. Really, there aren't many positives in that sense as to where things are going. If we look at the Gulf, the United Arab Emirates, I don't even know where to start. It's a criminal regime that does things surreptitiously. It supports murder in Libya. It supports Assad in Syria. It is a bad actor. On the other hand, if we look at some of the Muslim countries in the Caucasus, for example, Azerbaijan is finally retaken after 30 years of 1 million Azerbaijani refugees, the Nagorno-Karabakh area. So there are positives, there are good signs, there are changes. What Turkey has done in Libya is certainly a positive sign. He took what was happening there with Haftar and turned it around to where now they can have a government. There's hope. But, for every hope, there's misery as well. I mean, now we look at Egypt, for example. Egypt has Sisi. Sisi's nothing but a dictator. And the Egyptian people, well, I mean, where are they going to be? I mean, we see that Ethiopia has now started a dam that's going to cut off water going downriver, down the Nile. and Egyptians rely on that for survival. There are a lot of troubling things happening throughout the Muslim world. But then we look at Turkey, and Turkey is really a positive. Today we saw President Erdogan, who announced that the Black Sea discoveries of oil, of natural gas, are going to be ready to go online as soon as 2023. There are positives.
Yeah, Hamdi, I'm sorry we ran out of time, but I hope you can come back and we can have a longer time maybe to talk through these issues. But thank you so much for joining us. You do some very important work, sir, and I salute you. Stay safe and love to the family.
Great. Thank you, Mohammed. Pleasure to talk.
Taking a quick break. When we come back, we talk to Wakefield Drivers Association. Join us on the side of this. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. Now we're taking your calls on 01924231083 or get in touch with us on the social media handle British Muslim TV. That's all one word. Now, taxi drivers in Wakefield are claiming the council are treating them as third-class citizens and ignoring their pleas to be listened to. Last week, a number of cabbies protested peacefully on Wood Street in the city centre, calling for Wakefield Council to begin a dialogue with them. Among the grievances drivers have with the council is their suitability policy, which cab drivers in this case are alleging means lengthy bans for those who accumulate 6 points on their licence within 3 years will result in a 5-year ban, as well as a perceived lack of financial support during the current COVID pandemic. The Wakefield Drivers Association isn't recognised by the council, and their president is Yasar Ahmed. Really pleased to say Yasar is joining us live from Wakefield. Yasar, assalamu alaikum, and a very warm welcome to the programme. Great to have you on.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you very much.
Firstly, tell us, how have you and your family, your members, coped during this pandemic? Because lots of taxi drivers have been working on the front line since the beginning of this pandemic.
Yes, it's been a difficult 18 months for our trade, our drivers. Most of our drivers have had to go on deliveries for Amazon to survive. Some drivers had to rely on food banks to support their families. It's been a difficult 18 months. And, you know, our drivers have put their lives at risk to come to work. They've been sat at work for hours waiting for a job. It's been a difficult 18 months. But hopefully, you know, things are improving now.
Yeah, because taxi drivers, as our viewers will know, have been frontline key workers. They've been working during this crisis. They've suffered from the virus. And in some cases across the country, there are many taxi drivers who've sadly died and lost their life. Are you saying drivers are not appreciated by the council, Wakefield Council here?
Well, the government and the council call us key workers when it suits them. But in reality, they've treated us like second-class citizens. Wakefield Council has given no help to the taxi trade. Our neighbouring authorities, Barnsley, York, have given £500 per month to cover their overheads, because it's like a small business. So we have overheads. But Wakefield Council refused to help until January, when we got the MP Cooper and MP John Trickett intervened. That made the council make a one-off payment, which wasn't much.
Yeah. Now, you also claim you were ignored by the council. Is that because you weren't recognised as a trade union, like, say, the Wakefield District Private Hire and Hackney Carriage Association?
Well, it suits the council to ignore us because we ask questions, we disagree with their policies, we'll put objections in, where the other association kind of rubber stamps everything the council says. Like recently, they tried to bring in shirt and ties for all drivers. We objected. The other association agrees with them. I mean, why can't drivers dress the way I am now? And you know, sometimes you can over-regulate the industry. I went to do the English test and the maths test, and I failed both of them. So how many drivers are going to pass this test? You know what I mean? So we had to put objection in. So the organisation disagrees with whatever the council says.
So surely you should be working through that association, why would you feel the need to set up a separate one? Is there appetite amongst your members who feel they're not being represented?
Well, the Wakefield Drivers Association is giving drivers a voice. There's over 1,500 drivers in Wakefield. Why should 2 or 3 bosses represent drivers? It's never happened in any industry. How can you have a boss representing the employees? It doesn't make sense in any way. So we give drivers a voice, and now they've got a voice. And our concerns now are going out there to the politicians. But they have to listen to the drivers.
Yeah. Now, tell us a bit about the suitability policy, which we talked about at the top of the program, which is something that you oppose. Tell us a bit about that. Why do you oppose that? What is it, and why do you oppose it?
Well, the suitability policy is not just about the 6-point ban. We disagree with it because why doesn't that apply to bus drivers or council own employees, their own workers? The whole suitability policy needs to be scrapped. It's not just a 6 points ban that can lead to 5 years. Ban is historic cases. We had a driver banned in January for offence 28 years. After 28 years, the council have said, we no longer think you're fit and proper. In June last month, he got his badge back, but he was sat by the magistrates, ruled in his favour, but he was sat at home for 6 months. This whole suitability policy gives the bureaucrats powers. It takes the powers away from the elected members. You know, it used to normally go to a committee first. Now it goes straight to the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats decide whether you are fit and proper. They can just say, we don't like this driver. And that's what's been happening. Like, for example, a driver got banned for careless driving 7 years. Now, careless driving is it might not be a driver's fault. A drunken person's come in front of my car, for example, and I get 3 points by the police. But when I go to renew my badge, they'll ban me for 7 years. So It's not just the 6 points ban, it's the whole suitability policy and the interpretation of it. It's the bureaucrats that decide whether a driver is fit and proper, not the licensing committee.
But there's 2 things here. One is that, are you seriously suggesting that dangerous drivers who have 6 points on their license should still be a driver and not be banned?
No, what we're saying is that it needs to go to an elected committee. It might have just been over the speed limit, doing 35 miles an hour. Every incident is different. If the offence was 3 years ago, and another driver has run the offence within 3 years, after 3 years, sorry, he's okay. But if it's within the 3 years, he's going to get banned for 5 years. It's just too harsh. So why doesn't this policy apply to bus drivers, for example, or council's own employees? The whole suitability policy, if you apply that to MPs and councillors, there won't be anyone left. Because
okay,
you find this.
Yeah, so just stay there. We've got a call, and obviously we want to take as many calls as we can on this 01924231083 if you want to join the discussion. Let's go to line 1. Assalamu alaikum. You're live on British Muslim TV.
Hi.
Hello.
Assalamu alaikum, Shafiq.
Yes, brother. What would you like to say?
I want to say this taxi driver is costing them more, like Uber and black cabs and lots of other things, tax and all that, and insurance is high, and they got this new electric cabs and stuff, and they have to pay for it. They should have some kind of separate rule that applies to everyone with the new and old cabs and what people already bought, but should be allowed to carry on with the work as a livelihood. And if they be banned from driving due to accidents and whatever, drink driving and that for the communities, they should have 2 months or 6 weeks off because it's the livelihood, and they should do is airport picking and that. They shouldn't charge.
But sorry, brother, shouldn't the drivers be thinking about that before they did something stupid that led to them getting 6 points?
Yeah, but when they take a test, there should be in the manual all that. And there should be a special council, a board set up to monitor. They ain't got a board.
Okay.
It's a waste of time, brother.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your call. Yasser, can I ask you that similar question? If you were stripped of your license, it goes to a licensing committee, doesn't it? Or of elected councillors, and then you can also take it to court as well. Does that apply as well here in suitability? Is that facility there?
No, in the past, if it's a serious offence, then it doesn't go to licensing committee, it goes to the courts directly. But now in the suitability policy now for minor offences, you have been banned. It's not going to a licensing committee. So the bureaucrats have taken control over the elected members.
So there's no democratic accountability or oversight?
No, the bureaucrats are the judge and jury. The licensing managers will decide whether Yasar Ahmed is fit and proper. They could say he's dishonest. He might have stole a penny sweet 28 years ago. You understand? So if we apply the same rule to councillors and MPs, there won't be many left.
Yeah. Okay. And that's interesting. So you had a protest last week outside the town hall in Wood Street. What's the reaction been from your members? Because lots of them have been on the front line, as we talked about earlier. They've been on the front line. They've been key workers, critical workers, and now are being forced to protest.
Well, it's disappointing that we've got to resort to this, to bring our members out on the streets to protest. That's our legal and democratic right. We've had a good response from the drivers, and the local politicians have also joined us, so have the unions. So hopefully, now we can get our points out there.
Yeah. And in a sense, after that protest, first you were rubbished. You were attacked by the local authorities. They didn't want to engage you. They didn't want to recognise you. And then, surprisingly, they offered you a meeting with the leader of the council.
Yeah, the following day, we had a meeting with the leader of the council. Other protests as well, the new licensing chair, Councillor Kevin Swift, came out to talk to the protesters. And we appreciate him listening to our concerns. The following day, we had a meeting with the leader of the council and the deputy leader. And we've had some good talks with them, and they've agreed to pass our concerns over to the licensing committee. They've also agreed to recognise WDA, which means that we will be attending future trade meetings with the council.
Well, that's a big victory for you, because they spent the last week telling everybody, every one of us in the media, that you weren't a recognised trade union. So you must be pretty happy with being recognised now.
Yeah, definitely. Well, on the eve of the protest, the bureaucrats said that we will never talk to WDA. We find them, we don't recognise them, we'll never talk to them. The other association, they said that we'd rather talk to them and their legal representatives from Newcastle. And so this was a big U-turn from the council.
It was, because let me quote you, and this is, we did try to get somebody on from Wakefield Council, nobody was available. But they did, however, alert us to the council's Director of Communities, Glenn Humphreys. He talked to the Wakefield Express newspaper, and he said, we are committed to working with the trade through regular dialogue with the Wakefield Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Association, not the Wakefield Drivers Association. And that was what they were briefing to the media. Stay there. We're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll have the conversation with Yasar from the Wakefield Drivers Association. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. Yasar Ahmed from the Wakefield Drivers Association. The taxi drivers were out on the streets protesting last week, and so it's great that he is still with us. We'll be taking some more of your calls. If you want to call us, 01924 231 083. Now, as I said just before the break, we did invite someone from Wakefield Council to come onto the programme tonight, but we did not receive a response. However, the council's Director of Communities, Glenn Humphreys, was talking to the Wakefield Express newspaper last week, and he said, and I quote, because I think it's really important to put this on the record, we committed to working with the trade through regular dialogue with the Wakefield Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Association. That's the other association that Yasar was referring to. And he says, championing passenger safety is the highest priority, including measures that protect the health and well-being of the travelling public, which the council's policies are designed to support. Now, two things, Yasser. One, what do you make of that statement by Glyn? There's massive U-turn in less than 7 days. You're now officially recognised and respected. And second, no mention about your safety, the safety of drivers who are subjected to the most appalling abuse every night, not just in Wakefield, but across the country.
Yeah, it's not a surprise to hear Glyn Humphreys say this. Glyn Humphreys still doesn't recognise WDA, but the leader of the council does. Now, this is a constitutional crisis within the council. We've got the elected members who recognise us. The council legal team recognises, but the bureaucrats that sat in Wakefield won't refuse to talk to WDA. So I don't know how things are going to move forward in the future, because the bureaucrats have to do the reports for policy changes. So I don't know why Glyn is refusing to recognise us. Obviously, he's got his reasons, but yeah. I want to remind him that we, the taxpayers, pay the bureaucrats' wage. You know,
and you pay significant. Your members pay a significant amount. Sorry to interrupt you there, but you pay significant amount. You pay for your license, which is a significant amount of money, and then you, many cases, pay for your taxi badge. The license plate as well, which is not. It's not cheap, is it?
Yeah, the fees in Wakefield are the highest in the country. It's way higher than any other authority in West Yorkshire combined authority. So, you know, I mean, Glyn's worried about public safety and he wants me to wear a tie. I don't know how that's going to help public safety if I've got a tie on. I mean, have you got issue with sitting in my car with me wearing these clothes? He wants to bring in uniforms, ties. He wants me to do English test every year. He wants me to do a maths test. So how many of them councillors would pass this maths and English test?
Yeah, and their argument is that these are rules that have been brought in by the government, the Department of Communities, the Ministry of Communities and Housing are bringing in these rules, and therefore your protest should be not the people that have to carry out these rules, but the people who made the rules, and that's the government in Westminster.
No, that's not entirely true. Every council is independent. They can make their own rules. We in Wakefield have stricter rules than the whole of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. We have, for example, 2 compliance tests plus the MOT. All others only have 1 compliance test. That's Hercules, Calderdale, Bradford, Leeds, and York. So, you know, you can't just say it's national government. Wakefield Council was the first council to bring in emissions in 2017, almost the smallest council in the authority. We were to buy new cars, and then Glyn Humphreys said that any car that reaches 10 years old has got to come off. But York doesn't have an age limit, neither does Barnsley. So how do you explain that then? How can you say it's national government is bringing this in? How can you say a car
but the Department of Transport, so it wasn't the Department of Ministry of Communities and Housing, it was the Department of Transport in July 2020 brought out the statutory guidance in terms of suitability policy, but wider standards for taxis and private hire vehicles across the country. So it's a central government policy which has been implemented by Wakefield Council.
Well, Leeds have recently rejected suitability policy. Even if the suitability policy comes from the Department of Transport, it's for the councils to debate each amendment and make amendments. Leeds councils made amendments. They didn't agree with certain clauses. We are not saying anyone that's done a serious offence should be allowed on the road. Suitability policy, there's only certain clauses that we disagree with. But in my opinion, the previous conviction policy was fine. How many attacks has there been on customers? None. But on the other hand, there's been hundreds of attacks on taxi drivers. So why doesn't Glyn Humphreys do something for the taxi industry drivers' safety?
Because you claimed in your protest that you were, sorry, I don't think it was you, it was the Conservative councillor that came to that protest last Wednesday, claimed that you were being treated, taxi drivers were being treated as third-class citizens. Is that a statement that you share or recognise?
Yes, I think that's true. When we go for a taxi test, the council officers talk down on us. They treat us like second-class citizens. It's been like that for years. Wakefield Council has always treated the taxi drivers as second-class citizens. We don't have equal rights. We were guilty before, and we have to prove we're innocent. And that's with, even when we go to Wakefield 1, they treat us the same. Same with Newton Bar, where we go for a compliance test. The testers will say to us, we're going to fill your car because we can do it.
Yeah, because the suspension, if you like, or revocation of driving licence is something which the Local Government Act 1976 does. So it gives that authority and power to local licensing authorities like a Wakefield Council to make those decisions. Are you seeing the council willing to have that discussion?
Well, I think the new licensing chair, Councillor Kemi Swift, is a nice person. I think he will listen to our concerns, and I think he's willing to address them concerns. Like with this deregulation bill, you could have a taxi base that's got most of the drivers from out of Wakefield. For example, they might have 20, 30 drivers from Wolverhampton, 20 from Turkey, 20 from Bradford. We think it's not fair that only Wakefield drivers have to change their rear windows. Why doesn't the other drivers that are with other authorities have to change the windows? So if public safety was a concern, then how can it only apply to Wakefield taxi drivers? I mean, it could cost me £2,000 to change my windows. And first you say go buy an electric car, then you can't buy an electric car without darker rear windows. Then you could pay £2,000 to change the windows. So where do you go? I mean, buses have no age limit. So why would a taxi have an age limit, 10-year age limit? What if you buy a car 7 years old and add 5 years finance on it? What would you do? Get rid of it and carry on paying finance for 2 years? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Do you accept, as the Wakefield Drivers Association, that anybody, any of your drivers who's convicted of an offence that involves dishonesty, indecency or violence should not really be a taxi driver anymore?
But every situation is different. You can't say to me that just because I was dishonest 30 years ago, now you're going to revoke my license after 30 years. What if I've been a good driver for 30 years? Customers are happy with me. The public are happy with me. It depends on circumstances. I'm not saying that anyone that's doing a serious offence should be doing taxis, but all I'm saying is the minor offences needs to go to the licensing committee. There needs to be check and balances. You can't give one person, that's like a dictatorship. So a bureaucrat could just sit there and say, I don't like Mr. Ahmed, I'm not going to give you a badge. Go to magistrates. The magistrates is ruling in our favour, but why should I pay legal costs? Then you need to understand that 2 years ago, we won at the highest court on fees. So doesn't that make the council dishonest? We won the case and the council still haven't paid refunded drivers. I mean, after we won, Glenn Humphrey said we accepted the fee, we'll go back and we'll pay all drivers from 2004. Not one driver has been given compensation since that verdict. Recently, I know the MP is pushing them, and now we eventually got an update saying that we are working it out. But how long are they going to take to work out how much money is being owed?
Yeah. And are you finding that the council are not willing to discuss that compensation and paying back that money to drivers?
Well, they wasn't willing to give me an update, but now that the MP is involved, they've given him an update. I mean, MP John Trickey has helped us a lot, and he's got involved, and he even is a Labour MP, and it's a Labour council, and he's told them that you lost, accept it and pay the money. Now, since he wrote to the council to set up a commission to work out how much money is owed, a claims process, they set this up in January. But why didn't they do this 3 years ago when they lost? 3 years ago, the highest court in the country ruled against them. That was the final appeal. And he said after the court, he said to Wakefield Express, our finance team is here, our legal team is here, we'll go back and work out how much to drivers. Not one driver has been paid. Out of 1,500 drivers, not one person has ever been paid.
Yeah. Just tell us what are your next steps in this campaign? You're now finally recognised. You've had a meeting with the council leader, potentially you're getting progress in there. There seems to be your protest seems to have worked.
Yeah, our next step is we want to see policy changes. We know this is not going to happen overnight. It takes time. In my opinion, it takes 3 months. So it shouldn't take 3 years to make a policy change. If the councils agree that a policy needs to be changed, it's got to be done within 3 months. Why take 3 or 4 years? And previously, they've just taken the bureaucrats put the blame on the licensing committee puts the blame on the legal team, and no policy has been. When it goes against the drivers, then they quickly pass the policy through. You know, if you said to them tomorrow, let's pass the policy where drivers pass within a day. But when you said to the councils, let's pass the policy which extends the age of cars that are emissions compliant, it never gets done. Although they've agreed to it, they won't do it.
Well, I know this is an ongoing campaign for you, and there'll be lots of questions for Wakefield Council. We'll keep trying to get them on the programme, Yasar. But Yasar Ahmed, thank you so much. You're the president of the Wakefield Drivers Association. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Best wishes to you and your family and your colleagues. And then after the break, we're going to do something really, really interesting. We're going to talk, and I got it wrong at the top of the hour, we're going to go up to Scotland, in Glasgow, and talk to the Chief Operating Officer for Colourful Heritage about Muslim and South Asian heritage and history in Scotland. Really fascinating conversation about history in South Asian Heritage Month. Join us on the other side of these very important messages. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. Now, let's go to our final story tonight. The Muslim and South Asian story in Scotland is as long as it is rich. They've been part of the fabric of Scotland's society, but sadly, for decades, this history has been ignored or not discussed or celebrated. 10 years ago, Colourful Heritage began that journey to change the narrative and to celebrate that contribution. Shahid Hanif is the Chief Operating Officer for the Colourful Heritage charity, and he's based in Glasgow. I'm really pleased to say Shahid Hanif is joining us live from Glasgow in Scotland. Shahid, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the programme. Great to have you on.
Wa alaikum assalam, Shafiq, and it's good to be here.
First of all, tell us about that rich Muslim South Asian heritage in Scotland. When did it start, and when did the first people come to the UK?
Well, we have recorded on our digital timeline, Shafiq, that way back as 1855, we have the Black Prince, the Maharaja Dalip Singh, who was the last Maharaja of Punjab in present-day Pakistan and India, who came to the UK. You might recall there was a movie made with this character in mind in 2017, again named the Black Prince. So it's going back to the middle of the 19th century, really. And following on from that, we had a very small sort of an exodus, people coming in. I think 1869 was the first person to enroll of South Asian heritage.
So did you say 1869?
Yes.
Wow.
That's the University of Glasgow took its first undergraduate, I suspect. He was from India, Dopal Chandra Roy. I don't have any information as to what he was studying, but our records go back to that time.
Yeah. And have you got some other examples? We know about Sarwar Saab, the former MP, Mohammed Sarwar for Glasgow Central, and he was an MP there for many, many years. He's now the governor of Punjab. He's gone back home to Pakistan. Yes. Who else stands out in that history over the years?
Well, we have, Shafiq, it's really over the last, 70, 80 years. It's from the 1940s onwards. that we see this, South Asian immigration into Scotland. And of course, as you mentioned, Mohammed Shafiq, there are some notable other political figures, businessmen who started off as peddlers, selling door to door, and some of them who basically branched off into larger businesses, most of them having small corner shops, and then from there taking it on to larger cash and carries. For example, Yaqub Ali is one who developed the largest cash and carry in Europe, based in Glasgow, United Cash and Carry, and that was way back in the 70s. So we have these individuals who came into this country with very little money, and of course a lot of challenges. And then developed and grew out of that, using their business skills.
Now, in your important work, what can you learn and what can we all learn from that experience, that history and that heritage?
There's a tremendous amount there, Shafiq. There's the work ethic was absolutely, it was phenomenal. We have stories of individuals starting up businesses. And you have to remember one thing, that in those times, way back in the 60s and the 50s and 70s, they didn't have recourse to government funding, to community initiatives, etc. And the network just wasn't there. Even the South Asian network was very flimsy. So they brought a work ethic, a can-do attitude, and it has to be said, they laid the foundation for future generations.
Now, how did the concept of colourful heritage begin? Because let's be honest, most people are so consumed by their everyday life and the struggles of life, and their work and their family, really don't pay much attention about the generation that come before. So where did the idea come from, and what's the purpose?
Well, this, as you said right at the start, it's been over 10 years now since the formation of Colourful Heritage. There was a group of friends, and we sat together and we thought about this this important issue of our elders who are now passing away, and who have an incredible story to tell, and nobody's documented it. So our objective was initially to capture their stories, and to celebrate their achievements and inspire the youngsters, and we did that through capturing, their oral histories, and so far we've collated over 120 oral history videos digitally, and that's now obviously archived on our databases, and so it really emanated from that time, and I think it's important to basically capture and preserve this legacy that they left behind.
Yeah. Because the founder of Colourful Heritage is somebody called Mohammed Shafiq, and he said, we may not have changed the course of history, but we have certainly gone a long way to document it, because that really sums up what Colourful Heritage does.
Yeah, absolutely. And we as I said, we have created a digital timeline. We've created the digital archiving system of these oral histories. And we're actually in talks with the National Library of Scotland. I mean, organisations are now coming to us, BBC, NLS, and saying, incredible stories, what can we do to help? So we are now in talks with the National Library of Scotland to actually archive it on the system. They have obviously larger capacity, bigger bandwidth than we do. We're a small organisation. So it's, that's incredible work going on. And it's adding, we're adding to the database, we're adding to the stories, the oral histories, and educating, the generations, the younger generation, not only Asians, I have to say, but the non-Asians. As well as I do, in the aftermath of Black Lives Matter, that we have to tackle racism and Islamophobia. So we've now documented, we're running educational programs on educational packs in schools, on the British Indian Army contribution to the two great wars. So this is an incredible piece of work. And, we're not going to change, obviously, history and what's gone through, but we definitely want to make an impact on future generations.
Oh, and Shahid, where does your personal interest come into this? Is this something which you've always wanted to do, or have you just fallen into it as Chief Operating Officer?
my grandfather was involved in, he was a soldier in the Second World War with the British Indian Army. And to tell you the truth, Shafiq, I wish I paid more attention to him when he used to talk to us about his endeavors, you know, in Burma and other parts of the world in South Asia. And you know, coming along now, he's passed away. You know, I wish I had documented the stories that he told us when we were young. This is an opportunity now with the obviously Colourful Heritage and my colleagues to really now bring this together in a proper professional manner, in a manner which is digital, which can be accessed by, you know, any individual out there and used by generations to come. So that's my personal story at the background here. Yeah,
and in a real sense of trying to celebrate that in a community. I don't know that you could get into the politics of England, but certainly in Scotland, that generally tends to be more tolerant of immigrants and welcoming of minority communities, as we've seen in these past few months.
It seems to be that way, Shafiq, but there was a study taken by, again, another notable figure, you know, our contribution to civil life here and political life. We have Hanif Sarwar, who is the son of Mohammed Sarwar, who is, as you know, the Minister of Punjab. He is the first man of Asian heritage to become the Labour leader, Scottish Labour leader. And that's a notable first. I mean, if you really
he's done a really good job, hasn't he? He had a really good campaign.
Yeah, he did. But what I'm trying to make, the point that I'm trying to make is, you know, Hanif has done a lot of work in tackling Islamophobia.
Absolutely.
And the reports that we have so far, you know, it's actually on the increase. There are obviously in society itself. I mean, I'm not saying this is in general consensus all over Scotland, but you know, Islamophobia is on the rise, and you know, Scotland is no exception to that rule. And we have, as an organisation now, to tackle this menace, tackle racism, Islamophobia. And let the generation know that, you know, you have a stake in this country. You know, our elders fought for this country. You know, they fought Nazi Germany. Over 160,000 British Indian Army personnel from all faiths, Sikhs, Muslims, and Hindus, gave their lives. Over 4 million were involved in both the campaigns. I mean, this is an incredible achievement, which you know, which the media in the past just overlooks it. There's no real in-depth insight into this. And what Colourful Heritage are doing you know, we're getting this out to individuals. We're getting this out into the main social media platforms. And people like yourself are obviously part of that, helping us to disseminate the information.
Because in a sense, we don't get that, do we? You know, Remembrance Sunday service, we get to see all the Commonwealth ambassadors come out and lay a wreath, but we don't get to see the Commonwealth soldiers who served with distinction. Members of my family, my dad's cousins who served in World War II. Right. That's not recognised and celebrated, and this is a way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very important point. I want to touch up on this, Shafiq. One of the current projects that we're currently involved in is setting up Scotland's first permanent war memorial to the British Indian Army. We are now in talks we've set up a working group committee, and we're in talks with the Glasgow City Council, with the members of the armed forces who've been a great help, you know, General Bob Bruce, and you know, different stakeholders that we're working with, for example, on the Glasgow museums, etc. So we're looking to actually now, hopefully by this time next year, we will have a permanent memorial in a major location in Glasgow where we can commemorate sacrifices made by the British Indian Army. And I think it's been a long time coming. It's you know, we have commemoration for obviously for the normal army veterans of the two great wars. We have some commemoration of the Gurkhas, I believe, in Staffordshire, and of for the Sikh soldiers as well in some parts of England. But there's nothing done collectively especially for the Muslims involved in it. And the Colourful Heritage represents not only Muslims, it represents obviously the other faces.
Yes, it does. I know you're going to stay with us. We'll take our final break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation with Shahid, Hanif on the other side of this. Welcome back to Questions, the final part of the program. Where does the time go? I'm about to start singing, but I don't think I will subject you to that, Shahid. Me singing is never good. Shahid Hanif is from Colourful Heritage in Scotland. He's still with us, and I know you've agreed to take some calls and some questions, so let's see if we can open the lines. 01924231083 is our number. Now, we were talking just before the break about your involvement, your experience, and a sense that history is fascinating, and you can't really progress in life unless you understand from where you've come from. Abdul's asking on social media, where did the name Colourful Heritage come from?
It's again, it was a group of friends sitting down together. We needed to come up with something which was sparky, which represented the broad spectrum of the South Asian community. They bring a colourful aspect, to the fabric of Scottish culture and Scottish life, and that's demonstrated by, for instance, the contributions made to, for example, the restaurants here, the business life, the culture itself, the language it's spoken. So it's we needed a name which represented these strands, the different strands, and I suspect kind of Colourful Heritage was something that was absolutely apt in such circumstances.
And then Ariel says, I just want to share this to our viewers because I absolutely loved it. I was looking at your website yesterday, and really stood out for me was the anyone can submit their own history in a video submission. You talked about it earlier on. Tell us a bit more about that. Why is that important, and how much of the pandemic and our lockdown contributed to you doing this virtual thing?
It's important that we are, we have accessibility to individuals who are keen to get their stories told or get, the forefathers or the elders' stories out. We have a contact page on our website where you can submit your information, your details, and a member of our team from the research department, headed up by Saqib, will contact the relevant individual and arrange a date and time and get things done. Everything is done electronically. It's done over Zoom or Microsoft Teams, so there's no need to see the individuals face to face. So, we're lucky we have a strong digital platform to do this. In terms of Shafiq, in terms of our challenges during COVID, it's been difficult, especially for the elder generation. They don't have, with South Asians, they tend not to have hobbies. So they're very introverted most of the time. They stay indoors. They've lost that interaction with the general mainstream of society. And we found that, in some sections of the community, obviously health problems and mental health problems are on the increase. And I think therefore it's important for the media and for channels like us to maintain that contact with the community and provide some sort of a channel where they can actually air their grievances or bring back and relive their stories. Incredibly important through the challenges that we're facing through COVID and ongoing.
Yeah, and now this important work is supported by the Scottish Government, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, and all the other political parties, including the Conservatives and the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats. Shahid, how important is it for you to have this cross-party support?
Absolutely pivotal here, Shafiq. As you said, Nicola Sturgeon has visited our exhibition at one of the museums, and she was absolutely instrumental in her support. And what we've seen is we have cross-party support. So we have Hamza Yousaf, who's the member of the Scottish National Party. He's currently serving as the Justice Minister. And we have...
He's a health secretary, yeah.
Yeah, and we have Anis Sarwar, who is the first South Asian of South Asian heritage to lead the Scottish Labour Party. Both instrumental in their support for Colourful Heritage. So what we've done is we've garnered that support across I mean, both parties are politically, the ideologies and political motivations are completely poles apart. But nevertheless, what we've done is garnered and leveraged their support across party politics, and they've been instrumental in supporting our work and helping us and assisting us in any way, shape or form.
And how do you fund this work? Has the pandemic made it easier to do the work that you do online? And that makes you save money. But where's that money come from? Because obviously you're a charity and voluntary organisation.
We are a registered Scottish charity, but we are predominantly funded by the Scottish Government. And, we have some private donors as well who can provide, bequeath chips, etc. But most of the money, in fact, nearly all of the money is funded by the Scottish Government. And as I say, who are instrumental in seeing something like this, a community initiative, having a national impact, not just a regional impact, but a national impact throughout Scotland.
And you're kind of non-sectarian in the sense of, doesn't matter which part of the Muslim community you come from, or which part of South Asia you come from. This is about everybody. It's inclusive.
Well, you have to remember, I mean, the South Asian immigrants, it just wasn't Muslims. It was Hindus, it was Sikhs, it was from all the different strands, multi-ethnic. And Colourful Heritage Stand, we are committed to sharing their life stories, their values, what they've gone through on a digital platform. If it's a story worth telling, then definitely we will have outreach programs to all the different faith groups within our communities. And I think it's important to do that and not be closed and introverted or seem to be sectarian in such a way. And of course, these things would impact our funding as well, funding streams.
Now, you do lots of work in schools. How important is it to inspire young people to remember their history and where they came from?
Incredibly important here, Shafiq. Incredibly important. I just cannot, emphasize this point enough. We have developed 5 school packs which are going out to schools, which have gone out to predominantly 10 and 11-year-olds in primary schools here in Scotland, and giving them information on the contribution and the sacrifices made by the British Indian Army in the 2 Great Wars. There's also a pack on the business side, the entrepreneurialism, the civic contribution to civic life. So these packs are well put together. They have been researched methodically. We've worked with teachers and our major stakeholders, for example, Glasgow Museums, and have now, fully basically embedded these programs into some of the schools here in Scotland, and are looking to basically roll this out on a national basis to the rest of Scotland.
Now, can I make a confession, Shahid? I'm feeling really envious. I'm feeling really jealous of Scotland, that you've got this fantastic organisation. You're doing some amazing work. Is this going to be extended across the UK? Can we expect this some stage in the future to include England, Wales and Northern Ireland?
I don't see why not here, Shafiq. I mean, if something is worthwhile doing, then definitely I think it should be rolled out nationally. I will certainly sit down with the members of the senior executive team and draw up plans to do this sometime in the future. Naturally, our growth programs have been impacted by COVID, as have most of the organizations out there. But I think it's incredibly important at this stage in a juncture to actually put in the building blocks, see who's going to do the heavy lifting, put in business plans, see what we need in terms of funding. We need people to do the digital stuff. People need to get paid. So these are avenues which we need to explore. Yes, the desire is there. And I think it'll have an incredible work and incredible achievements of the rest of the South Asian community in England and Wales, and their stories have yet to be told as well. So it's look at the space. Let's see what can be done in the future.
Yeah, that's really important, and I think it's really important as we finish this program that we understand why you're doing what you do. And I was really inspired. I follow you on Twitter, Colourful Heritage, and I've just been really inspired by the story that I wanted to have you on tonight. As we finish, what's your message to our viewers about that history, about that contribution, and how we should recognise it?
I think the message is clear and concise from day one with Colourful Heritage. You know, be proud of the contribution and sacrifices made, especially by the role played by the British Indian Army, the passion and the work ethic by our elders in laying down the foundations. And be proud of yourself. Be proud to be Asian. Be proud to be British Asian, Scottish Asian, English Asian, Welsh Asian. There's an incredible amount of contribution which this society has made to the rest of this country, to the fabric of this nation. And I think more people will start to have take an active interest in the history and the heritage of South Asians to this country. Then I think there will be less racism, there will be less Islamophobia. And people will really be proud of themselves. They'll be proud to basically show that, we have a stake in this country.
Yeah, well, I know the work that you do in Colourful Heritage is so important to preserve our history and our contribution to society. So thank you so much for all that you're doing, sir. I salute you. I wish you well. And I look forward to coming up to Scotland and experiencing that work that you do.
You're always welcome, Shafiq. Always welcome.
Thank you so much. Shahid Hanif there, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Colourful Heritage. If you haven't checked it out, I really, really encourage you. Colourful Heritage Colourful Heritage is the organisation. You can get it on the website. Now, next week, the whole programme is devoted to reflecting on 3 years of Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan's time in office. You may remember in 2018, in that historic election, he and his coalition partners took office. And 3 years on, we want to reflect where he is, what went well, what hasn't gone so well, and looking forward to the next 2 years and then that general election that will happen in 2 years' time. What can we expect in 2023? We'll be joined by Shafaqat Mohammed, who supports PTI. He's a broadcaster, a reporter. And we'll also be joined by Amjad Malik from the Pakistan Muslim League Noon Party. That'll be next week at 8:30. But thank you to all the team behind the scenes for putting the programme together. From me, Mohammed Shafiq, and the whole team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'll see you next week.